Just look at the camera. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's viewing room. This evening, we have Mike Rucker, who is a Peoria Riverfront Museum Visionary Society Council member and a Duryea expert. Tonight, we are going to talk about the Duryea in Peoria, which is the first marketed gas-powered car. So, Mike, let's go ahead and get started here. So Charles and Frank were the inventors of the Duryea. So tell me a little bit about Charles and Frank. Where did they grow up? What was their childhood like? Were they always avid inventors? What do we know about them before the Duryea?
Well, Charles was born December 15, 1861, and Frank I was in Fulton County. Frank was born October 8, 1869, nearly 8 years later, in Woodford County. The family moved to a farm near Wyoming, Illinois, where the two went to school, went to high school especially. And when Charles was 17 years old, he built his first bicycle. It, of course, at the time was what they call a penny farthing bicycle with a large front wheel, small back wheel for steering, and he used a 42-inch farm cultivator wheel for the front and a 10-inch wagon wheel for the back. And he was riding this in the farmyard, and he saw in front of him a kitten about 100 feet away, he said, but his steering on the new machine, his new bicycle, was such that he could not avoid the kitten, and he says he ran over it. And the very next year, when he was 18, he had perfected his first bicycle, and he was allowed to ride it around the circuit of the Stark County Fair, and he acquired the name of Bicycle Duryea. Apparently, as he was riding around at high speed, his coattails were flapping out behind, much to the amusement of the people in the stands. So that was kind of a start for the two. I'll read something from L. Scott Bailey. L. Scott Bailey was the publisher of Automobile Quarterly magazine, and in this particular issue, in 1985, he documented our vehicle, and in there, he wrote this about the two brothers. The two brothers were both really significant automobile inventors. And here's what he wrote. J. Frank's cars were straightforward, conservative, well-engineered, and as uncomplicated as his life. Brother Charles' life was more complex, diverse, controversial, and difficult to tie down. His writing offers conflicting dates, lapses of entire sequences, and yet to be extremely accurate about others. No other automobile pioneer produced the amount of written material or knew the history of transportation as he did. That's about Charles. So he was a very significant person in the industry, and we'll get into more details as we go along here. So when Charles graduated from high school in Wyoming, Illinois, he went to Giddings Institute in La Harpe. And there he recorded that he read every issue of Scientific American that he could find, and was very interested in anything mechanical, particularly, of course, bicycles, because that was the big thing that was happening in that time. So when he graduated from Giddings Institute, he went to St. Louis, and in 1884, he began working for a bicycle manufacturer in St. Louis. And there he obtained his first patent. Over his lifetime, he obtained 52 different patents. And his first patent was a bicycle saddle for a penny farthing type bicycle. Apparently, it was a much better bicycle seat or saddle than had been available. And he made as many of those as he could afford to make and achieved a profit of $1,900, which was very significant. Somebody else stole his idea, and so he was, didn't produce any more. But with that $1,900, his mother enticed him to come back to Stark County, and he bought a farm. and he got married and tried to settle down as a farmer, but he didn't like it. Farming wasn't very profitable. So he went back to St. Louis to work for the same manufacturer and tried to get some financing to build his own bicycles, but couldn't. So he decided to go to Washington, D.C. And one reason for that is he wanted to read patents, and he got permission, he got a pass to read patents at the US Patent Office. So he read every patent he could. And there in Washington, he also worked as a bicycle maker and repair person. And then he decided he found some financing, and he decided to go to Springfield, Massachusetts. And he rented the second floor of a manufacturing building, and there he was making bicycles and invented a new type of bicycle, a safety bike. A safety bike has two equal-sized wheels, as we have today. And he was making bicycles, and he enticed his brother Frank, his younger brother, to come and help him in the business. And then he went back to Peoria to start manufacturing here. He found some financing with Charles Rouse. And so the two of them began making bicycles in Peoria Heights, particularly the Self bicycle, which was selling very well. So on one of his trips back to Springfield from Peoria, he stopped at the Ohio State Fair in 1890. And there he saw a Benz engine, which was running. It was not on a car, but it was running, and he recognized the potential. So from that point, he was determined to make an engine of his own that would power a vehicle. Now, by this time, of course, Benz had already been very successful in Germany with his own vehicle. So any questions from this point?
So, Mike, what role did each of the brothers play in the development of what would be the Duryea? So, Charles is at the Ohio State Fair. He becomes interested in the automobiles that are happening at that time. So, where does Frank come in, and how do they sort of complement each other in the development of the Duryea?
Well, in March of 1892, Charles there in Springfield, Massachusetts, bought a ladies' Phaeton buggy. In fact, this is it. This is the first automobile. He bought that buggy, took it to the manufacturing facility, and started working on the engine to try to power it. He had an engine block cast of his own design, and he worked for quite a few months there with Frank trying to make the thing run, but they couldn't get it to run under Charles' design. Particularly, they had trouble with carburation and with ignition. So Charles came back here to Peoria to continue his bicycle business, which was going pretty well. Frank stayed there in Massachusetts to work on it. In the meantime, Frank had some illness. He got married, but he still continued to work on that engine and finally got it to run. So on September 21, 1893, Frank finally had it running. And so it was on the second floor of a manufacturing building. So the first time he got it running, he was in the seat, and the car started moving down the floor towards the wall of the second floor of the building. And so his workman and he had to grab it, hold it back, shut the engine off to keep it from crashing through the wall. Well, they knew they had it running. So to get it down to the street, they had to tilt it up on its rear axle to take it down the elevator to the street. So they had a horse tow it to a certain point, and they had newspapers, reporters there to record it. He started it, and it ran about 200 feet. The engine ran fine, but the leather belt that was driving it slipped. So they took it back, took it up to the second floor, put on a better belt, took it down the next day and demonstrated it, and it ran very well. In fact, I think it ran several miles, and they knew they had a good thing going. So that was the publicity that they had. Now, we probably should back up just a little bit. This is a patent of the vehicle, and if you can't read this, but it's patented by Charles. Now, Frank provided the drawings of what he had done to make it work, to make the machine work, to Charles here in Peoria. Charles was very pleased with that and had the designs patented in his own name with no mention of Frank, which of course, it was the start of the controversy between the two brothers, which was an unfortunate thing.
Right.
So that's kind of where it went from that point.
But once
So
they got the car running, they participated in America's first automobile race, which
yes,
is rather
Frank
interesting.
Frank continued to work and developed a new engine. The first engine had a single cylinder. The second engine he designed was a two-cylinder engine, and he had it running quite well. And so he took it to Chicago for America's first automobile race. This race was sponsored by the Chicago Times Herald, and the Times Herald had been showing a lot of interest in automobiles. In fact, they had a contest, and in July of 1895, they announced the winner of a contest as the best name for this new gasoline-powered type of vehicle that was on the road. And the name they chose and awarded was the motorcycle, two words, motorcycle. So anyway, then they said they were going to sponsor, the newspaper, Times Herald, said they would sponsor a race for American-made automobiles. So of course, the Duryea brothers, Frank in particular, entered it, and they had to postpone the race several times because the inventors said that they didn't have their vehicles ready. So finally, on Thanksgiving Day, November 28, 1895, they were going to have the race, and it snowed the night before. Some people say as much as 12 inches. So there were 89 inventors who paid the initial fee to enter the race. And of those, 6 made it to the starting line. 2 of the vehicles were electrics, and they only got a few blocks before the batteries ran out. 3 of the gasoline-powered vehicles were powered by Benz engines, which they had imported from Germany, and 1 was powered by the Duryea engine, and that was this vehicle number 5. So these 6 vehicles started off in the race, and along the way, Frank was driving, and this is Frank on the left with the umpire who had to ride with him on the left, and along the way, he broke down twice, and he had to go and to find a blacksmith shop to repair a part that had broken, a lever that had broken, and he was not allowed to have anybody help him, so he had to do the blacksmith work himself, came back, put the part on, started off again, and broke down a second time, was able to repair it. Finally finished the race. It was a 54-mile race from Jackson Park in downtown Chicago to Evanston. And it only took him about 10 hours to complete the race. And only one other vehicle came in after him quite some time later. So he won the race with a speed of about 7.5 miles per hour, if you count the full time, because of course he was broken down quite a bit of that time. So that was America's first automobile race. And the prize was $2,000, a very significant amount. And that would be worth about $50,000 today. So with that $2,000, they were able to go back to Springfield, Massachusetts, and start America's first automobile manufacturing business. And that is what they're really famous for. They were the ones who, this is a photo of the inside of their manufacturing facility. And here they are making 13 identical vehicles, which they advertised and promoted and sold. And unfortunately, though, times were not good, and they could not get further financing, and they had to sell out within about a year or so. So that was America's first start in the automobile business.
So this manufacturing company lasted for about a year,
Yes,
correct? All right.
that's
And so
correct.
it looks like they employed quite a few people. Were they making all the parts for the vehicle in this factory?
For the most part, I think so. And of course, they would buy things like wheels and things of that sort. But yes, for the most part, if you look at the vehicle we have here at the museum and just think, how would you like to start building this from scratch? Building just about every part. So both Frank and Charles were just very, very brilliant inventors. I mean, they knew how to make things and knew how to make them work, and were very, very sharp in every respect of manufacturing and inventing. So yes, very significant inventors.
And so the Duryea sort of went on and had a little bit of an adventure with the Barnum and Bailey circus. So what part did the Duryea play in the circus?
Well, this is one of the first 13 vehicles, uh, and the Barnum and Bailey Circus bought it because it was such a unique thing in the day that people were not familiar with seeing an automobile, and so they used it as the leading vehicle or leading of the Barnum and Bailey Circus for several years. And at the same time, one of the vehicles was eventually used here in Peoria. One of Charles' vehicles was used in the Santa Claus parade in 1899 to pull 7 wagons of the Bergner store to promote the Bergner store in the Santa Claus parade. So yes, automobiles in that point in time were very unique and not well appreciated by a lot of people.
Yeah, so what kind of was going on with the automobile industry at this time with the Duryea brothers? So for a question, how much did the Duryea cost at this time? Was it something that if an average person wanted an automobile, could they afford it, or was it a bit of a luxury?
It was absolutely a luxury. No one could afford it unless he was fairly well to do. And so it was still a novelty. In 1896, a man in New York had bought one of the first 13 Duryeas, and he engaged himself in the first automobile accident in America, at least the first recorded one. And he struck a bicycle rider and broke his leg. And so the police took the driver of the Duryea into jail and locked him up overnight for the accident. So yeah, they were expensive. I can't tell you exactly what the first vehicles there from Springfield cost, but yes, they were fairly expensive. Yes.
So the brothers, you alluded to this a couple minutes ago in regards to the patent, and I know everyone at home can't see this letter, but it is a letter written by Frank Duryea where he suggests that Charles had not. This is an image of Charles in the Duryea automobile that took part in the Chicago race. And Frank says that Charles had never driven this or any other Duryea car. So could you talk a little bit more? We start to see Frank and Charles diverging. They are really no longer partners in this Duryea invention. So where does Frank go?
Uh, in 1898, they sold out to the National Motor Carriage Company, and Charles came back to Peoria, and Frank went to work and in fact became a partner with the J. Stevens Arms Company in Massachusetts, and over time produced a lot of vehicles. And Frank uh, became very wealthy, and in fact, from his ownership and involvement with the J. Stevens Arms Company, they were called the Stevens Duryea, and he was the primary inventor and did quite well. Charles came back to Peoria, and in this barn, which was behind his house on Barker Avenue, he began to develop a new vehicle, which he called the Peoria Trap, TRAP. And the Trap, as a horse-drawn vehicle, was a lightweight vehicle supported by springs. It was usually driven by women because it was more comfortable. And so this is what he was working on. The neighbors were not happy because it was noisy, it was smoky. They didn't like what he was doing in the backyard there. a lot of complaints, a lot of police complaints about Charles Duryea and what he was doing. But he finally made 3 vehicles there, 3 prototypes. And two of them were 3-wheel vehicles. One was a 4-wheel vehicle. Ours, the one we have, was a 3-wheel vehicle, which was initially a, a delivery vehicle of this sort. This is our vehicle. Now that body that on the back there has been removed and lost, but this was our initial vehicle. So it's a very significant machine. I mean, he had a lot of good inventions that he used on this for the very first time. So he was very hard at work. We can talk about some of the things that's in this that are very unique. First of all, it has a planetary transmission, which was his own design. He patented it. It was very well designed and just excellent. The front steering mechanism was also an excellent design and patented. It has pneumatic tires. He had a patent for pneumatic tires, one of his 52 patents. He was not the first with pneumatic tires. Pneumatic tires are tires that inflated with air. Prior to that, they were made of rubber, but they were solid. The control of the machine is primarily by a lever, and you can control it by the speed, by twisting the handle, 2 speeds forward, and turn it right and left to steer the machine. So very, very easy, very convenient. So it was quite a good machine. And as you can see, you know, when you see it here at the museum, it's a beautiful machine. The reverse direction was from a pedal there at the bottom of the seat. You can see there, you step on that and that would reverse the transmission.
So, Mike, tell me a little bit about how it was to drive this vehicle. I can't imagine with this single steering mechanism and the reverse pedal and brake pedal, what would have it been like? Did you have a lot of control when you were driving this? How fast did a Duryea usually travel?
Well, it would go 20 miles an hour. And of course, I've driven it, you know, and being a 3-wheel vehicle is not as stable as it should be. I mean, if it gets on a steep slope, you know, it can turn over. But it was a great vehicle. So somehow or other, he thought that 3 wheels were better than 4. But anyway, so that's what he's got. So he started manufacturing then in 1899, probably January 1899. He got some funding along from the Cyberling brothers in Peoria, what's now Peoria Heights. And he started the Duryea Motor Wagon Company there and started manufacturing. He initially had a plan to produce 100 vehicles, but he only produced, we're not sure exactly how many, but 12 or 13. Now, initially, he had the engine blocks cast at Peoria Foundry. He had 18 engine blocks cast. He did not use all of them. He used 3, of course, in the prototypes, several more, we think about 12 in Peoria Heights. And then the recession hit in 1900. And so he had to go out of business in Peoria Heights, but he found some financing in Reading, Pennsylvania. So he took the vehicle that we now own here at the museum. He took that vehicle to Reading, Pennsylvania, along with the remaining engine blocks. And the first vehicles he produced there in Reading were very much like the ones he produced in Peoria Heights. This is what caused the confusion as to whether our machine was made here in Peoria or in Reading, Pennsylvania. And of course, we had to prove that, and we did. There's only been 4 owners of our vehicle over all of its life. So it was not terribly hard to prove that. So it is certainly, there's no doubt about the fact it was made here in Peoria. This is one of the machines you see here that was made in Peoria Heights. And the only other Peoria Trap Duryea is in the Henry Ford Museum up in Greenfield Village, Michigan. So there's not many of them left.
So while he was in Peoria, he manufactured another type of prototype vehicle, and it was a type of armored car, or at that time, what would have been considered that. So how did this come to be? What spurred him to be drawn to invent this type of vehicle?
He built this vehicle in this fashion for the Northwestern uh, Military and Naval Institute in northern Illinois. And as you can see, what it has is a metal plate in front of the driver and the gunner. And then what they would do, it was thought to be good for crowd control. They could drive this up to a crowd, and the only way that the gunner could even aim it was for the to use for the driver, to steer it this way or that to aim the gun. So it was a three-wheel vehicle, and the plan was to drive it all the way to New York to display to the War Department what a great vehicle it was, and they should buy a whole lot of them. But they got somewhere in Indiana, and they'd broken down several times, and the roads were so bad that it was just constantly getting stuck. So they shipped it back to Chicago first, and then shipped it back down to Peoria, and they made it into a four-wheel vehicle. And there it is as a four-wheel vehicle, still the same vehicle. They just put a new front axle on it, and it supposedly performed a bit better. So yes, that was probably America's first armed gasoline-powered vehicle.
It doesn't seem like it would be of a lot of use in a military situation, being completely exposed. And
Right,
you can see in this photo, the two
right,
gentlemen on the
right,
back
right,
don't seem very secure.
right. Well, it was only a few years later, of course, that the tank was invented and built and taken into World War I. But yeah, this was not probably the greatest idea in terms of warfare.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that the recession hits and Charles decides to leave Peoria after manufacturing how many cars in Peoria?
We think about 12 were manufactured in Peoria Heights. Yes.
Okay. And so he takes our car, which was a prototype, and his remaining engine blocks, and he heads to Reading, Pennsylvania. But that's not the end of the development of cars for Charles. He continues to go on and building new types of Duryea vehicles.
Yes, he went to several different locations. He was constantly getting in trouble with financing, and his cars were not selling well. And he finally ended up in Philadelphia. And his last vehicle was in 1917, and he called it the Gem, Gem. And there's one of these vehicles at Wheels of Time Museum, and you can see it there today. They've kind of reconditioned it, and so that was his very last vehicle. Along the way, when he was having trouble financially, he was a consultant to other automobile manufacturers, including Henry Ford. And so that was how he made some money along the way, but he was never successful as his brother Frank was in making money at automobile manufacturing. So it was kind of sad. So finally, Charles died in 1938, and he, along the way, was, well, quite frankly, very poor. And at one point, he got a request from an inventor from an automobile company to provide a drawing of one of his inventions. And he wrote back saying, I must have payment in advance because I'm flat broke and have to squeeze every nickel till the buffalo bellows. And of course, he was talking about buffalo nickels at the time. So that's how poor he was, and it's just very sad. At the same time, though, from time to time, he did consult for Henry Ford and was a very significant contributor to an important patent trial. There was an individual called Selden, Selden, who had a patent and claimed that everyone who built and manufactured gasoline-powered vehicles owed him royalty. And of course, Henry Ford wasn't about to put up with that. So Henry Ford challenged this, and his star witness, of course, was Charles Duryea, who came. And along the way, they made Selden build one of his vehicles to prove it would work. It didn't work, and of course, the patent was defeated. But there was a close association between uh, Henry Ford and Charles Duryea.
And Henry Ford has been attributed to saying that Charles did more for the automobile company than anyone else, correct?
Yeah, what he said was the Duryea was a masterpiece. It did more to start the American automobile business than any other vehicle. And he was referring to the ones made in Springfield, Massachusetts at that time. So yes, in fact, there's some historians who say that the first vehicle that Henry Ford ever saw was a Duryea, one of those Duryeas. I can't verify that, but it's perhaps true. But certainly Henry Ford was a great admirer of Charles Duryea. There's another thing about both the Duryeas is they shared their inventions very openly. I mean, a lot of manufacturers, are trying to be secretive and have the uh, only special thing that they had invented. But the Duryea brothers were very open with that. Even though Charles had 52 patents, he was still, willing to share his knowledge with people.
Yeah. So Charles, as we talked about, he left Peoria and went to Pennsylvania, but Peoria continued manufacturing vehicles. So can you speak a little bit on that for just a moment or two?
Well, two automobile manufacturers came to Peoria and made vehicles for a time after Charles Duryea left. One was a fellow named Bartholomew, who produced a Glide automobile, which was a very good vehicle. And in fact, when Teddy Roosevelt came to Peoria and was being driven in a Glide automobile along Grandview Drive, at that time, the drive was not paved and it was full of ruts and whatever. So his host was apologizing to Teddy Roosevelt, saying, "I'm sorry, it's such a terrible road." And Teddy Roosevelt replied, "Nonsense, this is the world's most beautiful drive." So just a typical Teddy Roosevelt type thing. So that was the Glide automobile, and it was a very excellent vehicle. And you can see one of those also out at Wheels of Time Museum.
And then this one was also manufactured in Peoria?
It was. This was by the St. Louis Car Company, and they made locomotive. Well, they made train cars. It's when it says St. Louis Car Company was initially making train cars or carriages, and they came to Peoria to start manufacturing in about 1904 or 5, and this was one of their cars. And it also was a very good car. It was not as successful as the Glide, but it was a very excellent car. So Peoria has had three car manufacturers. That's, of course, Charles Duryea and Bartholomew with the Glide and the St. Louis Car Company.
So for anyone who maybe tuned in a little late to our presentation tonight on the Duryea and Peoria, I thought maybe we could end, Mike, with maybe you just telling us one or 2 points, takeaways about what makes the Duryea in Peoria so significant.
Here's a quote from L. Scott Bailey, who sold the Duryea to us. And he was in contact with the Smithsonian secretary back in I'm not sure what year, 1980s, I suppose. And the Smithsonian secretary, Charles McAdams, wrote, quote, and this is about our vehicle, the Peoria Duryea trap we have here at the museum. And the quote is, "It will continue to evoke the rich images and association when there is no one left to recognize it, a treasure that will retain a permanent value as a signpost of a time, guiding visions to a deeper understanding of the past and present circumstances that are important to understanding the world in which we live." So the vehicle we have has a lot of great inventions that Charles put into it. And it's just remarkable that it's been retained all this time and in such excellent shape. So I think we can all be very, very proud of having it here.
Yeah, we are. We are. We are so thankful here to have it at the Peoria Riverfront Museum. So thank you so much, Mike, for sharing all of your Duryea knowledge with myself and everyone watching this evening. Thank you to our Visionary Society, our members, and thank you to the Rucker Family Foundation for making the Duryea exhibition possible. So we certainly hope that everyone can make their way into the museum and check out our Duryea trap. So yeah,
One
Mike.
more point. One more point. The Rucker family has a pledge towards creating a new Duryea exhibit, and here's another portion of to fulfill that pledge.
Thank you so much, Mike. We appreciate your generosity here at the museum so much. So thank you everyone for tuning in tonight, and we will chat with you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.